From the great halls of their house, there are assembled three who hope to one day be the world's greatest driving heroes. Created from the cosmic legends of the universe comes our team captain, the Vision, Bill Fisher. Their soon-to-be Wonder Woman, Vicky Fisher. Our Captain Marvel and head flight trainee, Jennifer Skripchuk. And our Batman, the master of tools, gadgets, and all things mechanical, our mild-mannered soon-to-be billionaire, Alan Danvers. Their mission, to fight injustice, share what is right and wrong, to get you out of your house and come out racing with them, and serve all mankind. They are the Garage Heroes in Training Team.
Welcome to the Garage Heroes in Training podcast. I'm going to be one of the hosts for this episode. My name is Bill. Who else is hosting?
I'm Vicky.
You are. And Miss Vicky, we have guests. We have guests that we have traveled around the world through the internet. We are going to track them down. We've gotten them. They have a TV show. I first knew them from their podcast. We actually got a question answered very early in their podcast, which started some of this debacle that we've done. They also have at least 2 YouTube channels. Knowing them, they've got something else brewing because they're the craziest busy people I've ever seen. We have Todd Deacon and Paul Schmucker. Welcome to the podcast, gentlemen.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys, for having us on. Nice to be here.
No worries. So we can't say you're official Garage Heroes in Training team members because that kind of fell apart because you guys are just way too busy.
True.
However, we've upgraded our cars.
Oh,
We're slightly better at driving. We have the open invitation. We just need you two to actually take a day off and come out and go racing.
oh
Yeah.
wow.
We do.
Okay.
But they've already experienced lemons once.
Yeah,
They might
several
not want to
times.
do it again.
Yeah. We've done it a few times. What are you guys driving now?
Well, in our family, I bought a turbo NB Miata, and in our family, NB apparently stands for not Bill's because Vicky stole it.
Oh, okay. All right.
Not Bill's
We have
car. Love it.
So we have for lemons-ish or endurance racing style, we have E46 BMW, kind of like a spec E46, but it's a little bulked up for endurance racing. And then we have a spec Miata, and then we have a race truck, and then we have a Honda Civic. So you pretty much got a smorgasbord.
That sounds
You pick
awesome.
anything.
I love it.
Is that the S10 race truck?
The S10
Yeah.
race truck.
Is that
Currently-
a stake bed with the stake bed side still?
Yes, it is.
Yep.
That
That's
is,
awesome.
isn't it?
Loki. It's Loki
Currently
this
Loki,
time around.
you know.
Okay.
Nice.
Yes.
It's
We
still
turned it into
alive.
Loki. We decided to go villains this year.
we did.
Okay, cool.
Still have a Chevy engine in it because that thing's just going to run.
It does. It does. And
Nice.
and
You know-
it is way more fun than it deserves to be. It's the silliest, stupid sounding car, but it just goes and it
What's
We do.
really, really funny is about it is that when you're racing it, you're racing a truck and
Yes.
you're doing really well with it. And it's just hilarious because, people come around and you're like, oh, here comes a pickup truck, stuff like that. Well, no. And then you just kind of smoke them. Or,
That's awesome.
in my case is that
you go
not
truck
so
hunting.
much. Yeah, I go truck hunting. So I go look for other trucks on the track.
Love
And
it.
that's all
Love
my
it.
competition is. Only,
Okay.
yeah. And then what else is about this truck that makes it really funny? Oh, just passing people, just like, I just passed them in a truck.
Well, I was thinking it'd be great if you towed the other race cars to the track with that truck and then raced the truck and then drove out of the parking lot towing the race cars back home. That's what you need.
It's funny. Now I'm not up to the speeds that I want to be yet. So what I end up having to do is kind of do a little bit more crafty, and I just stuff people behind slower cars and take off in the trains.
Find them drafting you often. Are you getting drafted and
I
then
don't-
slingshotting around you?
Yeah.
There's
Yeah,
very
that-
few people who will enter a car too wide with us and think they're going to win because
Yeah,
There is
it's
that.
a truck.
sure. Yeah,
It's funny.
I can see
It's-
that for sure.
It's a hoot to drive.
So just in case, gentlemen, in case they aren't familiar with you, in case they haven't been following along is it getting close to a decade now or more?
Yeah, big more.
Podcast since 2014 and everything since 07. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've got a crazy number of episodes, but just in case people aren't familiar, maybe we go into personal life, professional life, maybe even professional life before, so we get a little bit of history for you guys.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, what go for it, Paul. Go for it, Paul.
Oh, either way, came from drawing cars in the margins of my math notebook in grade school. And I was always encouraged to do something with that. So I pursued being a car designer, and I have a degree in car design from Art Center College of Design in California. And in California, Todd and I met and didn't realize at the time that we were both as car crazed as we were. And so I came from a car design background and a lot of product design. Cars are just big, expensive products, and had a career in the tech industry working for a software company called Autodesk. And they make software specifically for car design and visualization. I say, if you see a vehicle on the road, chances are it's one of two softwares, and it's probably Alias made by Autodesk. And so I used this software, design visualization software, to go talk to car companies around the world and be in their design studios. And sometimes people would say, wait, don't you work for Everyday Driver? Because all the car designers are consuming all the same automotive media as the rest of us. They're looking at everything else all the other companies are doing. You walk into a design studio and there's stacks of magazines, they have YouTube videos up. They're all watching the same kind of media. And so I worked in that for about a decade, leading up to about 2017, 2018, somewhere in there. And we had the opportunity to just move full time into this. But since 2007, both Todd and I have been doing this full time since 2017, excuse me. And then just behind the scenes as a hobby that turned into something we really wanted to do long term. Because as the impetus of the show, we always say, people were asking us, hey, you guys know something about cars. Would you hold my hand when I go to the dealership so I'm not quite so intimidated by some salesperson who's been there probably 3 weeks and I don't know what kind of car I want to get? Do I want a car, a truck, an SUV? Will you come with me and help me decide? And then Todd was consuming a lot of Top Gear at that time, 02, 03, somewhere around there. That was back when they were a travel channel with a car problem, and said, there's Motor Week and there's Top Gear. There's nothing really in between, right around 07. And we wanted to consume car content that we would like to watch. And that was really the impetus for the show. And it built up since then. But over the years, we have gone through a lot of different camera gear that the show predates a few modern things that people just take for granted now, which is kind of funny. But we're always upgrading gear and looking at how to, be faster and move more nimbly. So yeah, background in tech and leading to cars. And so we always remind each other, like, this is a work day. We're out here driving cars on a Wednesday in the middle of nowhere.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yep.
You pinch me.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Exactly.
Yeah, I had a very weird day today, in fact, because I have a Lotus Elise that I've had for 4 years now, and I love it. It's amazing. I always wanted one, and I have one now. And just because of all the content that we do, I've found that I don't do much coverage on it, because it's the car that I just go drive for fun. I don't really want to shoot with the Lotus. So somehow I've had it for 4 years, and we've never shot those really good car-to-car rollers that we do, the nice 3/4 of we've never shot that in 4 years of having the car. It's never been in a TV episode, had a reason to shoot it. So we just went out today and shot me in my car rollers. And I got the other day, I was like, this is the weirdest day ever. I just went out, drove my car around, and you guys filmed it. So it was great. But back to your question, I came out of the film industry, and actually that's what I wanted to do growing up. I loved cars. But then I got to, 14, 15, 16, and quickly realized how much my parents had terrible cars, and that wasn't going to change. And I was going to get a hand-me-down terrible car, and there was no money for anything fun or any thoughts for anything fun. So I just kind of moved on, because film was what interested me, and story and all that. I'd always been a storyteller. But I was working for New Line Cinema. I worked there for about a decade in post-production, worked on a lot of feature films. And while I was doing that and commuting, I literally was coming home one night and drove by a used car dealer that had up on one of those, like, you could have this stands, a Nissan 300ZX. Now, it wasn't the twin turbo, but it looked really cool. It was the car I'd always wanted. And the prices had come down enough that I went back home and told my wife, I really, really want this car. And she said, of course you do. And but then I took her over there to show it to her. And as she sat down into it, she was like, this is really nice. And I thought, good. So we got that.
You took the CFO with you.
You better believe I did. Absolutely. So we went and did that, and we actually bought that car, and that became my daily. And so I was commuting to New Line Cinema in my 300ZX. Of course, it was a non-turbo, it was an automatic. It was definitely commuter spec, but it was the first really great car I've ever owned, fun car I've ever owned. I found myself doing 100, 150, 200 miles in a weekend just to be in that car and to do fun driving. And that was the big impetus for me of just going, wait a minute. all these people in Los Angeles that are commuting and hate their car and hate being in this situation. Why don't we have cars we like? And that mixed with starting to watch Top Gear and going, well, this is actually great. This is actually cinematic. Somebody thought about how it's shot. Those
Right.
are the two things that made me go, okay, there's something in the middle between Top Gear and Motor Week. And I went to my only real serious car friend, who was Paul, and so let's try this. And Paul said, I have no idea what you're talking about, because that was not his background. And I was a guy that I was always behind the camera. I didn't want to be on camera, but in this instance, I wanted to be the guy driving the car. So that meant I had to get over it and get on camera. So we did first test shoots with our own cars in like 06. And we built a pilot. It's crazy. We built a pilot in 07 and shopped the pilot in 08, right in the economic downturn. So that pilot did not go to television. Yeah. Got a lot of great responses, followed by nobody's buying. So we went out to YouTube at the beginning of YouTube even offering, we were in the beta program for ads, where they first were like, we should put ads in front of stuff. And so they reached out to us. We were in the beta program for that, which was craziness. And that was the place to put it because we didn't have anywhere else to put it. We were fighting to be on TV. And then somewhere along the way, we were on Matt Farah's podcast a couple of times, and people kept saying, you guys should do a podcast. And for a while, we were like, on what? Because we didn't want to do just a hangout podcast.
Yeah.
It felt like Matt had nailed that. But then we started getting so many people requesting, hey, I have this amount of money. I'm looking for this. What do you think? We're like, that's the podcast. We started that in 2014, right around the time we were getting into doing feature films on the side, because, we were bored. And we've been doing podcasts. We started off half hour, we thought was plenty. And once a week, we thought was plenty. Now it's an hour long and twice a week. We've got 630 something podcasts at this point, 5 feature films, 2 YouTube channels. We just finished season 9 of TV, where we do 6 episodes a season. That's on the Motor Trend cable channel. But it wasn't until, actually, Paul said it, 2017, when we actually went to TV, we were able to actually make the jump from it being the side hustle to the full-time thing. And when we made the TV jump, we were able to go full-time, and then we just keep at it. Because one of the two of us has a crazy idea. We could add to what we're already doing. And then and rarely, here's the crazy thing, rarely does one of us go, we're not adding that. We just typically go, well, let's figure that out. So now it's why we've got so much going on.
So you guys are almost the perfect guests for Vicky. So Vicky is very artistic, loves to draw, loves to sketch. So we've got Paul. Then Todd, we also, half the reason we named our team Garage Heroes was we were into the superhero movies, and Vicky is a huge Hobbit head, which you worked on.
I did, yes.
So she's just sitting there giggling the entire time. However, in addition, you guys are also nearly the perfect guest for us, because your first Lemons episode on your TV show was the one that kicked us over from thinking about doing this and buying the car that you recommended for us to have as a track day car, to actually going out there and getting started. Now,
I love it. That's great. I love hearing that.
We highly recommend getting the CFO of the family involved in this, and we've had a great time. And our son does it, our daughter will do it, and a bunch of our other family friends do it as well. But you guys, with the show and with the podcast and with some of the YouTube channel videos you've done a decent amount of racing and a lot of race training. So which ones were your favorite, and what did you think you learned the most from?
Are you talking just Lemons episodes in particular, or just any of your,
you've done several things. So it's, I don't want to lead the answer by suggesting what I think it looked like, but
it's been a lot. As a matter of fact, as I was expanding my role with this software company, back in 2014, 2015, I was getting sent to Europe quite a bit because a lot of the software was developed in Germany. And one of the trips, I was going to be in Frankfurt, which is about 90 minutes from the Nürburgring. And I said to Todd, look, I'm going to be there. Do you want to just take some vacation time and fly over and meet me? I'll take some vacation time. We'll stay after. We'll go explore the ring. We'll go do something. I don't know what. We'll just go explore. Well, that turned into a feature-length film, one of the first one, actually, a feature-length film that people have said, wow, I'd like to go with you guys on that trip if you ever go again. And that kind of shocked us. Yeah. And so that's turned into an annual, when there's not a global pandemic, an annual trip to Europe to take people that want to go with us and do the experiences that we kind of didn't know what we were doing. We just explored that. And so that has to be way up there with, one of my favorites is just it was the exploration. It was, all this new stuff, but then, all the sort of driving training that we had definitely applies. It was just this brand new experience. And just the unknown parts of it, there's still a lot of unknowns about it, but now it's very much a known quantity to us. And we feel like we've made this discovery, even though everyone knows about it, but not everybody's driven it. And so we have this opportunity to say, you could do it yourself. You could go plan your trip, and many people do, but come with us. We'll break bread at the end of the day. We'll go to dinner together, talk about what you learned today. We'll introduce you to people. And people are so affable when they've got, a group of 10 or 12 or 15 people. People love, hanging out and meeting us, and we get to introduce people and make new friends too. So I think that particular trip has that kind of thinking. It is those two places, but that kind of thinking has spawned a lot of these meetups that we're doing. We've actually got coming up this weekend is a Utah meetup that has just spawned, just want to come hang out with like-minded people and enjoy driving. That's one of my favorite things.
Isn't that really a lot of what it is about too? It's like just going out with your best buds and doing something really good.
Yeah.
Having a great time.
Totally. I really liked the original Lemons experience because I didn't know what I was in for, and I liked that we were filming it at the same time, and we had Dale, who set up the team for us out of the Seattle area. He reached out to us, and I got really candid with him. He said, "Do you guys want to be on the team?" And I said, "Look, man, we're frankly, it's intriguing, but we're just too busy to wrench on a car. If you're willing to have us kind of like parachute in the day before and hop in a car that's ready and film it and be part of that, then we're up for it. But otherwise, there's just no way for us to do this." And he was like, "Yeah, I'm going to do it anyway. And I need 2 more drivers. So would you guys please come?" And that was amazing. So, because we did get to drop in and shoot and create. But at the same time, we'd had some driver training, so we were comfortable being on track. But it was the first thing, anything close to a race. But then I loved the fact that it was racing, but it also was really low consequence racing. And so you could be competitive, but I mean, I've met plenty of people that are real racers for fun. They're at the amateur level, but they're so obsessed by it that I kind of wonder where the fun went, and Lemons allowed you're racing and it's competitive and we're serious to a point, but we're also just glad to be here. And there's people that arrived here this morning that have never even been to a racetrack, let alone zip into a suit and drive it today. So, I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed that because it felt like it played directly into the kind of stuff that we want to encourage, which is people having a great time in a car and finding the accessibility points of it. So I loved doing the original Lemons. I also really liked when we did the SCCA license training because that was single seater and open wheel kind of style. So it levels the playing field. And it made me discover that while I'm not all that competitive a guy, I like being competitive against Paul. So that was fun. And that was revolutionary because by the time we got to that, we'd done a lot of, the Nürburgring thing that Paul said, I 100% agree with that trip. But by the time we got to the SCCA thing, that was like the gateway to now you're serious. But Paul and I had enough training, and we've joked a lot of times that he and I go about laps differently, but we wind up with very similar lap times. And there it was shown because I'd be halfway around the track and Paul would be on my bumper. And then the next half of the track, I'd be like, where'd he go? And vice versa, because we'd just be doing this based on who does corners better. And it was fun to actually see that in real time. So those are the two that are the highlights for me, for sure.
We're always trading notes on how did you break that hard into a corner? And how are you making that work? And then, another corner, like, you're gone. How did you make that stick? Like, I can't figure that out. So funny.
So me being me, I can't help but follow up just a smidge. You guys always say you end up at the same time, but you get there totally different. Is there a way to characterize where each of you has a gap on the other, or is it track dependent or something else?
Gosh, I suppose it's track dependent, but we've proven that in video games too. We'll drive the same car on the same track in video games. You do the ghost car. So somebody sets the fast lap, and then of course you hand the controller, and then that car will just leave you in a corner. You thought, I thought I was fast. And then other times you went, I'm suddenly beating you. How did I do that? We're finding that virtually, interestingly as well. It just kind of depends on the corner, how we take in various corners and, comfort level with that. I guess I don't really have another explanation.
It's something about how we naturally read tracks that each of us has corners that just instantly click for us, and the other one will struggle with that corner all day. And you line all those up over time, and we end up being very similar drivers in time, but just going about things differently.
Yeah, agreed.
Mm-hmm. So now that you guys have gotten yourselves involved with so much, are you guys looking big? Are you guys dreaming big? I mean, where do you want to take all this? Or are you pretty much there?
You're talking about the brand or just all the elements or anything?
I mean, you guys have so much going on, which is great. And I mean, how far do you want this to go? Where do you want it to go?
Well, we have heard of various stories where fans of the show have inadvertently been standing in line at the DMV or standing in line over here, talking to somebody, and they strike up a conversation. Then it suddenly turns to cars, and then they realize you follow Everyday Driver too. And oh my gosh, those guys. And then they each have their own stories featured on the podcast. They bought a car because of this reason, things like that. I think ultimately, and that's where it's continuing to go, is just introducing people so you're already at a love for cars. And really that's all that matters, because so many YouTube comments are, I'm better than you, my car's better than you, you don't know anything. We're just here to love cars. And that's what we wanted the brand to proliferate. And we do have things up our sleeve that we have not announced yet. We're continually thinking and working on the future and where's everything going to go. But ultimately I feel like we want to continue to proliferate that feeling, that thinking. When you see an Everyday Driver sticker on another car, you go, oh, I feel like they're my best friend already. That's what we want.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with that, because we had a conversation with somebody in Hollywood, and I, lived in Hollywood for years and worked there for a while, but had a conversation with somebody in Hollywood, and we were talking about the desire to help people that's tied into the brand. And I swear to you, the longer we talked about it, the more they looked at us like, stop lying. And I was like, no, I don't, that's really is core. There's a core element in what we do that is absolutely that. But in a larger sense as well, one of the things that Paul and I struggle with, maybe struggle's too strong a word, but we always have crazy ideas that will take weeks to film and tens of thousands of dollars. We go, okay, all right, stop, pull it back. What can we do with what we currently have available in schedule and time and money to actually do a variation of that smaller? So we've always thought bigger than we can, but that's one of the ways we've been able to grow. In a perfect world, look, I'd love Everyday Driver to be a brand where in 20 years it's still a known brand, and Paul and I show up every now and then in a video and people are like, oh, it's the old original guys, because now it's moved on to other people that people recognize as the brand, but people that can maintain the feel of what we do would be awesome. I would love for that to happen and to proliferate. At some point, Paul and I are going to want to do less, but I would like to be, basically because of my makeup as a creator, I'd like to maintain more of an oversee and be involved in the things I'd like to be involved in and let allow, because there's so much happening all the time, and Paul and I are out front of all of it. I look for the brand to be something that can live on while we step back, but are still involved. I think that'd be great.
Well, we've always been about the brand. We've always been about the brand first. I remember having that discussion, Todd, with you when we were building it up, thinking this is not about the Todd show or the Paul show. It's not about our names necessarily. And, there's famous designers out there, Vicki, as you know, when your name becomes a brand, you've made it. You're done. Chip Foose is a great example. His name is a brand. Everybody knows the Foose brand, whether it's wheels, whether it's cars, whatever that is, he is synonymous with that brand. But we wanted the brand to be the forefront. So whatever we had built or created, people know the brand. Doesn't matter who's hosting it, as Todd said, in the future. We just want the brand so you instantly feel connected and everybody feels sort of welcome already. But you're right, we've got tons of ideas and tons of projects, but it's always good for us to sort of let the blue sky happen. Just let's talk it through. This is totally not feasible, but what a sweet idea and what a cool film that would be. And, it's going to be Michael Bay level explosions and CG, but yeah, we can't really afford that. So how can we bring it back a little bit? But that's what we're thinking about for the future. We're wanting to continue to do films and continue to do trips and, meet people and grow the brand that way.
That's really good. Yeah, I think with you guys, as I have been in this for 4 years, and we walked into this not knowing anything, like zero, nothing. We just decided we didn't know how to work on cars. We didn't know bought cars. We didn't know how to race. We didn't even have a garage. We had nothing. We just
No
decided,
tools.
no, we're going to do this. Right. So we decided, but it's really funny because I keep slipping deeper and deeper into shows like yours, into the community like yours, because I've really loved doing this. I didn't think I'd love it as much as I do. And I've gained enough mechanical knowledge and racing knowledge to where I just talk to people now and they just glaze over,
Happens. Yes.
So I find myself dipping deeper and deeper in the community because I have a hard time relating my hobby and with just everybody that I used to hang out with.
Sure. Yeah.
Can you look at various nuts and bolts and tell me whether it's a 10 millimeter or a 17 millimeter? Can you just look at it and hand me the right socket?
Right. It's just
Pretty close. So just to finish that one, since you guys are looking to grow the team, I'm just wondering, since you've already got your third host coming up on board, Todd's son, who's lobbied for the position already.
Yes, he has. Absolutely. It's a weekly discussion for sure. Yeah, absolutely.
The key question I'm not sure you've thought about yet is what color shirt would he have?
This is an excellent question, and I don't know if it needs to be a darker red. I don't know, or lighter red. I don't know what it needs to be, because he has the only other everyday driver jacket with a red stripe is his, because he wanted a red stripe. He's like, Dad's got a red stripe. I need a red stripe. I have no idea what it'll be, because a lot of the colors have been taken. Yes. So we might have to circle back to green, which actually we had Tom from Germany who used to do stuff for us in green, but he used he's a huge Celtics fan, so he did Celtics green. So I think there's like a dark green available too that might work. We'll see.
Okay. All right. Well, you gotta plan ahead and keep these things going, because
absolutely. Yep.
I don't know about you, but the lobbying is pretty hard from the sun, so we understand that. So
for sure, absolutely, yeah.
So since your brand and a lot of the focus of your podcast especially is on car selection. For people who aren't familiar with the two of you, you each have an individual predilection for certain aspects of the car. What do each of you look for a car that is, let's go James May and say which the cars that give you the fizz, what are the things that give you the most? What are you looking for? Because it seems to be different. I could say what I think your answers are, but
I mean, I look, I own a Lotus Elise. That kind of says everything, I think. I mean, ultimately, the cars that I enjoy the most are almost always light. Yes. Typically, pretty much everything that I have really enjoyed and don't shut up about on the podcast or elsewhere is something that weighs less than 3,000 pounds. And that could be front wheel drive. I mean, the Fiesta ST is something I've talked about a lot. Typically, when as a car gets heavier, I find that it gets more distant and less interesting. That doesn't mean that a 4,500 pound Dodge Hellcat with a crazy 700 horsepower motor, it doesn't mean I can't find that funny and can't be in it like, yeah, I see why we're liking this. But would I buy that? Probably not. You put me in, we just did an 8-car piece to sports cars under $8,000. And I finally really got to drive the Toyota MR2 of the early 2000s, the MR2 Spider, which I had actually test driven before. And it was a test drive. It wasn't great. And had kind of circled before and kind of was intrigued by. And here was this car, 2,100 pounds, mid-engine. In many ways, it's the cheap version of you bought a Lotus Elise. And it completely spoke to me, much more than it spoke to Paul, because yeah, the interior is not nice, but have you seen an Elise interior? Have you seen a Miata interior? I'm not that concerned with the interior being nice. Now, I love being in an S-Class. Put me in a loaded SUV. I get it, but I just thoroughly enjoy, if I'm out driving, to just be very involved and to have something light. And it's funny because I like that so much, but I'm not interested in being on a motorcycle. A lot of the guys, there's a blending there. I rode bikes for a bit, and it's just not something that I'm drawn to. But light cars are definitely my thing. And that typically, not always, typically means they also handle well. But I just like that light involvement.
Mm-hmm. I got 1 out of 3 on that. So I got 2 more that I thought, but okay. Paul, what do you got?
When I was in design school, early on, I had an instructor who told the class, he started out the semester by saying, welcome to being a designer. From here on out, your education will teach you that you will become kind of a snob, knowing how products are built, knowing how much and seeing how much they cost, and then knowing how much that actually costs to build. And that can happen with any product, expensive down to a $2 toothbrush, but knowing the design process and knowing what that is, he said that will definitely shape what you look for in your own products and your own design. But what that's done for me is, as a Porsche super freak, I want every car to be a 10 out of 10 or as close to that in every category. Stylistically, engineered, put together and built, power, handling, everything all in one. And so I've got a Porsche Cayman GTS, which I'm a huge fan of the mid-engine feel. Both Todd and I can definitely agree on mid-engine. We love that engine right here, rotation kind of feel. I love Porsches for that very thing. And I'm not into them just because it's a badge. Unfortunately, Porsche is synonymous with, oh, you've got, a lot of money in or you just bought it to show off or, project a certain image. That isn't the case. After understanding how Porsches are built, and everybody who works on the Porsche assembly line gets to spend different amounts of time, well, pretty much the same time on different elements of building the car. So after a few years, you've almost done everything to the car knowing how it's built, but there's a consistency to how those are built. And I appreciate that so much. Now, absolutely, I want small and fun and lightweight. I might not be quite as, a stickler on the weight just because some of my favorite Porsches are over 3,000 pounds, but 3,500 is like, yeah, that's a fat pig, to us. We look at the Nissan GTR and it's almost 4,000 pounds. And Todd and I still scratch our heads. We can't understand how it's so quick and fast.
It's amazing. It's amazing in its own right. Yeah.
It's fantastic. But I probably right around 3,000 is the sweet spot. That's right where Caymans are. Of course, I love stuff lighter, but it's hard for me to really love a car if it does one thing really well. On the racetrack, of course, you want power and it just has to handle well. If body parts are held on by zip ties and it's ugly, I don't care. We're racing here. That's not the point. But for a road car, for something to own, to put your money into, I want it to be in every category at that high level. And it's hard to come away thinking, oh, it's like an 85 or 90% in this one category and almost everything else lets me down over here. It's hard for me to really love that. But that doesn't mean I just like fat, heavy cars. I love the lightweight stuff. I love the small, compact, but Caymans are actually bigger than the Elise.
For sure.
The Elise
Almost
makes the
everything
Cayman
is.
look huge, as a matter of fact. But it's still a small, fun, lightweight car. And I love that. But then everything else, I walk away, I look at it. Wow, I just love how that looks. I love the stance. I love how it's built. Oh, I love the engineering. Oh, I love the engine. I love the sound. On and on and on.
I got 3 out of 3 on Paul on that one, so we're good.
I hate that. I hate that.
I missed Todd. I missed you for steering feel,
Okay.
and you must fit into it.
Oh yeah, those are vital, and they because they are tied into the fact that I like small light stuff, which means some of it I won't fit in, and if I don't fit in it, I mean, look, I'm not going to own it, and that's the crazy thing about the Elise is the fact that it is minute, but something about those ergonomics, once you're in the door, I fit really, really well. And of course, the Elise being, no power steering at all, the steering feel on it is unbelievable, and that absolutely plays in. But I find that all the light stuff tends to have better steering feel than the heavy stuff. So it all kind of connects for sure.
So tell me about shifting from your hobby to turning it into work. How was that experience?
Well, you just have to be booted because you have to have whatever company you work for just let you go in a giant layoff, and then you'll be forced to reevaluate everything about your life and really make it fly. That's what happened to me. That my company moved on from me, but to be honest, I was really happy about it. I love the time that I spent in the tech world, and it was really informative and educational. But they don't pay you for nothing, and I was constantly traveling. And somebody else owned me. And I love the fact that I was building a business with my closest friend. And, it was up to us. We were responsible for if it lives or dies. And, you're working for yourself, and, what business owners will all tell you. But it was really one of those things where, it's like, well, we're not going to give it the big push 5 years from now. We're not going to wait 10 years. The time is now. Let's put forth this effort. Let's see what's possible. And we know there's many outlets of which to consume car information, and we welcome everything. We want to have our, like I said, like-minded people in our corner where you can come and just know that you'll be welcomed, no matter the car knowledge level. we go down in the weeds, Vicky, too, with engine codes and chassis codes and, all that stuff. But we also want, if you're just discovering cars, we want you to enjoy it too and feel like you're just part of the community too, and put our influence into that direction too. But ultimately it was sort of like, let's make it fly now. Let's put the effort in now. What can this become was our question.
Yeah, there was a point in time with the economy when everybody kind of had to go to like a version of gig work or starting fresh or starting to create, so it's very interesting. How about you, Todd?
Well, I had worked at New Line Cinema for a decade almost in LA, and had left that because I was pretty burned out. And that was 2007, right around the time we started the show. So I spent 6 months to a year really concentrating on kind of getting the show up on its feet. But then I needed a job. I needed work. And we actually left Los Angeles in 2010. We moved to Utah, which was hugely wonderful. But that was even a gamble at the time. But I got working as a editor for a commercial production house in Salt Lake City. So I took my post-production experience and was working there. But I mean, that was the day job. But it was very much, I turned that whole part of my brain off as soon as I left there. And sometimes, lunch breaks, I would stop editing for the place I was working for, and I would spend my lunch break eating and editing for the show, and then I would go back to stuff for them, and it was nights, weekends, every spare moment. We had a young son, so juggling that kind of stuff as well. I mean, I was looking for the way to have it be full time, but wasn't sure how it was possible. We've been on YouTube since kind of dinosaurs roamed the earth, but at the same time, we've never been hugely successful on YouTube. So while we made money on YouTube, what that pretty much was doing was offsetting production costs, but it wasn't really paying us anything. And the podcast began to get some traction, and that began to create some income, which was nice. And then the TV opportunity came up. And when that came up in late 2017, that was the first time that we had two outlets in television and podcast that allowed us to partner with some sponsors that made the possibility of me losing that income from editing commercials as a viable reality. And there was definitely that hard conversation between my wife and I of just going, okay, I still have this job. And unlike Paul had a life shift for sure that was facing him, but I could keep working. I could still be working for that company. I mean, I still have friends there, and they would take me back tomorrow if they could. But we had to have that conversation, which is like, okay, this is an opportunity to step out. And we have to hope, and this is the big gamble, we have to hope that the sponsors will be there and their checks will show up in cash. So that was the big step out. But we knew once we had that TV opportunity that also there was no way to handle television and YouTube and podcast and another job on top of it. So back to what Paul said, it was very much a step out moment of, if we're going to do this, we need to do it now and not, in the future when we think it'll be more comfortable. So it definitely was a gamble in that regard, but it allowed us both to be so much more focused that's one of the reasons we were able to go to things like 2 podcasts a week and feature films on the side. And I mean, for the first couple of TV seasons, when we were doing TV, YouTube became crickets. There was nothing coming out on YouTube for 3 months, and I hated that, but there was just no way to do it all. So once we stepped in full time, we were able to kind of, have all the buckets be fed, if you will. And that wasn't possible before.
Yeah, I love all that. I'm continually thinking, Vicky, about just what the future holds for us. But ultimately, the kinds of companies that we want to partner with are always companies that we feel like are helping people too. It's sort of like, if the guys recommended, I can. All right, they said to do this. We want to help people with the companies that we partner with, and so we're grateful for those companies and be able to proliferate. As Hagerty has always said, they're saving driving. We're not interested in saving commuting. That's the tagline. We want to save driving, and we're so like-minded in that, and that seemed to be such a great fit for us. So those kinds of things that are right in along the lines of helping people, we always come back to that as the foundation that we stand on for whatever it is, new thing that we take on. We run it through that kind of filter and say, is this going to matter? It's not just us driving something fun. I mean, occasionally there is. We get to drive something like a Porsche 959 and a GT2 RS. That is fun, but it's not just look at us, look at cool car we're driving, and you don't get to, and love on us for that reason. No, we want to do that every so often, but we want to bring it back and relate it to that poster you had on the wall as a kid. That car's not really good to drive, or it's even better than you think, or whatever that is, and sort of confirm or deny that car in people's minds, and always come back to, using those filters of helping our audience and being relatable.
Awesome.
So with the shift from the hobby part-time aspect, although it sounds like, Todd, you had about the same work schedule you do now, what was surprisingly easier than you thought it would be, and what was surprisingly harder than you thought it would be?
The hard part is definitely convincing sponsors and approaching sponsors, because a lot of times sponsors want to either sprinkle dollars around, or they're already embedded, with various advertising agencies, that kind of thing. So sometimes that can be difficult to say, look, we want to bring our audience to you and offer our audience to you. And there will be that traction because, a lot of times once people find the show, find the brand, they're very embedded. They're very, kind of with us, our people, and anybody can join. It can really be anything, anybody. And so that's been a bit of a tougher thing, but the easy part has just been waking up and realizing this is what I have to do today. It's going to fly because we've done it and we've put the time in. The other hard thing is it never shuts off. Just like working for the tech industry, they always have the electronic shock collar to contact you at any time, day or night. But if it lives or dies, it's because of us. And so there's always that responsibility, but it's nice to have.
Mm-hmm.
And I deal with as a content creator first, my default setting, if something isn't working or isn't growing or isn't what I want it to be, is I'm going to go create again. And sometimes the struggle for me is to not do that and to sit down and worry about the admin side or the sponsor side or the stuff that is the behind the scenes stuff that isn't me shooting something else, writing something else, editing something else, because I will always create content and I'm kind of a shark in that regard. I don't sit still very well. But the dealing with the other stuff and jumping off something Paul said as well, I have been continually surprised by how great many of our sponsor conversations go on initial conversation. But between that and they wrote a check this week is always a longer, harder slog than I think. We've had very few initial sponsor conversations where people are like, yeah, I don't get it, because we try to be pretty selective in who we approach. And a lot of people seem to really instantly connect with what we brought to the table. But the gauntlet of running through that till they actually are a paying sponsor is surprisingly difficult, especially considering I'm fighting that desire to just be like, you know what I should do? I should go edit something else. I should go do more, So I'm definitely driven that way. And I've found that I have to schedule time where I am out of the house and away from, the home office. Because if I'm here, I think, I could go do that. I could go do that right now. So I have to be very meticulous. And that's been the last 2-3 years for me, as we brought a couple other guys on to help, is me just planning time to not be here so that I'm not doing and balance things out better. And that's been helpful for me.
Mm-hmm. So probably the more challenging part is the hustle.
Everything is the hustle for sure.
I mean, the creativity's fun, the driving's fun, the filming's fun, stuff like that. But it's the behind the scenes hustle, which I hear a lot about that. Yeah. It's usually just by racers in general, that, people that are actually on race teams, that's some of the things, like, racing is only part of it. There's this big whole operation that goes on behind it that sometimes it's not so fun.
Yeah. And pro drivers are always looking for their next ride too. They're not driving to win the race. They're driving to impress whatever next team they might get a ride with. So it's the same kind of thing.
Yeah. It's just from a different element of it.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So as we threatened before we started the show, we do have our Fast and Furious Storytime questions, which which could be fun.
Okay.
So the simple one to get started is, what was your first car and what was the worst car you've ever had?
Sometimes they're the same.
Can be the same. Yeah.
We've had a lot of people write to us for podcast questions or car debates, and their list of cars they've owned in their life is huge. It's incredible. To be honest, I have not owned that many cars personally. What the show has done for us is we've been able to get in lots of cars and driven lots of cars now, but I haven't owned that many cars. I had a rusty first car that was a 77 Jeep Grand Cherokee that I shared with my sister. My father had decided to take the dealer up on their extra underbody coating, but he waited a week in the Minnesota winter, so all the salt from the roads got right up underneath the car and into the, worked its way into the chassis. And then he did the underbody coating, therefore peeling in the rust, and it just rotted from the inside out. And then he finally handed it down to my sister and I, so we got to drive that car. And it was the best and the worst. That car went through a lot. Best car though probably has been so far this 2015 Cayman that I've got. I'm very thrilled with it. And to be honest, to answer the German maintenance question, and it's been a scary car, I haven't put that much money into it. Yeah, I've gone through tires and brakes and rotors and that kind of thing. That's been the biggest cost, but I haven't, nothing catastrophic necessarily. Doesn't mean something won't happen, but I've been very pleased with that. So that's been good news.
What about you, Todd?
My
First and worst.
My first car was a 1982 Pontiac Firebird. Now that is, just so you can all picture it, that is the kit car, okay? That is the car that was kit, except I got a used base model, which had a 2.5 liter 4-cylinder in it. I believe it was called the Iron Duke. It cranked out a crazy 90 horsepower. It was a 4-speed manual. It had 90 horsepower in a car that probably weighed about 3,000 pounds. So the good news is 16-year-old me wasn't going to get any trouble in that car. The bad news is it didn't want to run very well. And I got very adept at not only shifting to pull every possible horsepower out of that car, but also the alternator refused to hang on to belts. So I actually carried extra alternator belts in the hatch of the car. And I would get about 2/3 of the way to school and throw a belt that would be able to limp to school. And then after school, I got really adept at putting a new belt on it and getting somebody to jump me. And we would get 2/3 of the way home, throw the belt again and get home. That lasted a few weeks. I think that car was in my life maybe 3 or 4 months total. And my dad jumped that to the curb. So that was simultaneously first and maybe worst. But then I inherited a list of Caprice Classics, because that was all my dad. Once he discovered those in the 80s, that's all he bought. So then I got the hand-me-down Caprice Classics for a while. Honestly, I did that until I got married more than a decade later. And then I inherited my wife's manual transmission first gen Ford Explorer, and that felt like an upgrade. And then luckily everything got better from there.
Okay, so you guys post on your Instagram. You request questions. Now I have posted this question a bunch of times, and since you're on my podcast, I get to answer it. But I can't ever word it right, so I don't think you understood the question. So Here it is. I call it the ladder. You start with let's keep it to relatively new cars. Don't go back in time. As you progress, theoretically, as the price goes up, the car should get better. However, I don't think we are going to shock anybody to say that just because you spent more on the car, it doesn't mean that it's better. So if you were to start your ladder with the lowest car that would make you happy price-wise and work your way up to, north of $100,000, somewhere in the reasonable range, what would the steps be in your ladder where no car cheaper than the car that on the ladder is better? So as you progress, the car has to get better than everything cheaper.
Are you asking for
Rungs are we
particular
talking about?
What's that?
How many rungs are we talking about?
Depends on the cars. Like Paul eventually is going to have a Cayman.
Are you talking? Okay.
Right?
Oh.
Eventually
okay.
on the ladder, Paul will have his Cayman.
He's talking about one of those big hook and ladder fire trucks that has
Right.
the ladder that reaches up the side of a 60-story building.
But everything underneath it has to be worse than that car. So
Are you asking for sort of architecture types of cars or specific models?
What
I
makes
guess
your
it's the cars that you've owned?
No. So this is relatively new cars. It's my question, Vicky.
I have a big question mark above my head right now.
I understand.
Like,
that's why they never
with
choose this question.
I think I get it.
to get there. So let's say it's a car it's 2021. Let's say it's a 2018 and up cars, because you guys drive everything. So you're the one that actually care about your answers. So the cheapest car that would make you happy, let's say it's a Miata. I don't know. And then what car goes up that's better in steps? So you can start and think about that as you wish.
It makes it tough because you're not allowing us to go back in time. Like we just completed the cheap sports car challenge, and I'm sure we both want to go back 20 years to choose some cheap, fun rear-wheel drive car.
You could do that as your first step.
Okay, as our first step. Okay, fair enough.
Okay.
All right.
And
Well,
Vicky's writing on my question sheet that this is a horrible question. Thank you.
Oh, no, Bill, I'll tell you, Bill, the reason that it doesn't get tackled in our questions most of the time is it's more like a topic Tuesday. You're going to have to brace yourself for like 20 minutes for each of us.
Right?
But I mean, I'll dive in. I mean, I think that the first car is probably some sort of really cheap hatchback, like the current Corolla XSE with a 6-speed, or I mean, I realize we don't get the Fiesta ST anymore, but I would say Fiesta ST, something that's around 20 grand, front wheel drive, good dynamics. That would be step one. And then you step up from that into something like a loaded out 86. So you're talking about 30 grand or so. Now you're rear wheel drive, you're lightweight, good rotation,
Sure.
6-speed manual, that kind of thing. But that's not a powerful car.
Nope.
So you got to step up from that to something like a BMW M2. Now you've taken the architecture of that FRS, but you've given it a lot of power. You've also given it a lot more luxury. So you've got a different feel in that regard. You're spending roughly 60 grand there, 60, 70, something like that. Somewhere in that place to jump up from that. Now, let's say I'm at 80 grand or so and I get myself a C8 Corvette. Now I've got really interesting, high power, bigger car, big GT, long legged thing, but I lost manual transmission. So that's a bit of a bummer. So then I would end up at about 100 grand, 110, and I'd get myself a Lotus Evora GT with a 6-speed and be a very happy Todd.
And if you can get them all in the garage at one time,
There you go.
that's very good. I'm sort of similar. I'm thinking Hyundai Veloster N.
Okay, that's a good start.
Those are 30 grand. I realize that's pretty hot, but got to get after that. I want to have both front wheel drive and rear wheel drive. Yeah, I'd say the new 86 has really impressed me. I really like that car a lot. It's brilliant to drive, and we're looking forward to driving that a lot and comparing it to the world, every car almost. So that would have to be up there, probably, either start with that or start with the Veloster N, but those are kind of interchangeable. And maybe go to a Supra, maybe the hot BMW, definitely a Cayman at some point. And at that point, we're getting 80, 90 grand, somewhere in there. I love the C8 Corvette as well. It's such a different flavor. And that mid-engine rotation is there. It has a different flavor. And I like it a lot. Ultimately, though, I'm GT3 911 or GT4 Cayman. That's
of course you are. Of course you are. Yeah. None of us are surprised. This is my not surprised face.
Yep. Yep.
I'm so mixed, but I want a car that is very precise and has good steering feel, is still lightweight enough, but still is so well built and engineered. The Lotus Evora GT impressed me very much, but I'll probably put the GT3 above that just because it's more expensive.
Not a problem.
There you go.
And I'm sure, given a few more minutes, you could come up with a watch that matches each of them. So that would be great.
Probably could, yes.
I should. Although somebody asked me what watch matches a Toyota Prius. Do you know?
I would go with a 80s Casio digital.
Maybe.
Swatch watch.
Swatch ain't bad either.
Watch. It is watch.
Swatch. I knew it.
Right. Yeah, I could spend time. As a matter of fact, Todd and I have discussed what other podcast would we branch off of? What else would we like to do? And Todd has wanted to do one. It's is it the James Cameron one?
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to do some film breakdown ones and go through people's bodies of work. I think that'd be amazing. But anyway, keep going.
We were thinking about that for him, and I've come up with a watches whiskey design and bringing that up, we still haven't done any of the Stallone films. It kind of devolved into Watches, Whiskey, and Stallone films, and we could bring that back up for another time when everybody's trapped inside.
The problem is that every time I try to convince you to watch a bunch of Stallone films, you go, "Do I have to?" So that's really why that hasn't happened. I think I've watched more of his old body of work in the last couple of years than you have, and I keep watching him and laughing and going, "Paul needs to see this," and you keep going, "I really, really don't want to." So I understand. Yeah,
we did watch Tango and Cash. There was that one that was so bad.
We did watch Tango and Cash. That is a fantastic 80s film. It really is it's up there. But
what else did you see recently? You saw like Cliffhanger or one of his others recently.
I watched Driven, the F1 related one, and it was even worse than I remembered. And I remembered it as being bad.
It's better than Cobra, though.
And I had forgotten that he wrote it.
Oh, he did?
Forgotten that he wrote it.
Oh,
And the writer in me had to play snob because there's character motivation and stuff going on in the film. Like, nothing you've done here makes sense, but you're the writer and the star, and so they let you get away with it. But anyway, yeah, there's that.
not the name, man.
Wow.
So yeah, I've thought about Watches Whiskey and Design, just to talk about all the fun stuff that we can talk about. But yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah,
maybe
this
that'll happen in the
podcast-
future. We'll see.
this podcast, we kind of roll it in because we're garage heroes in training. Our cars are heroes. We dress as heroes. And then we do pop culture on the movies that come out. So we have these Woot episodes way off our topics, and we'll just go completely over the latest movies just to take a break from our podcast. Because anybody listens to us needs to like superheroes too.
That's cool. I love it.
They don't
I
have
went
to.
through the Gone with the Wind era, and I do remember hearing about that. And then there was is it Hairspray that you had to sit through and do some post production on?
Oh yeah, the Hairspray was probably the last. The Hairspray redo was probably the last film I think I worked on at New Line, 200 something films, and one of the first ones was the re-release of Gone with the Wind. But I also worked on Pleasantville, was probably the newest. That was the first thing when I started working at New Line was Pleasantville. That was in like '98, and the last thing I worked on was Hairspray with John Travolta and Zac Efron, and that was the span. But I mean, in there is Lord of the Rings and the Blade series and Austin Powers and a bunch of Paul Thomas Anderson movies and stuff all over the place. That was bizarre. Yeah, for sure.
Well, speaking of Fast and Furious, Paul Walker was in Pleasantville as the
He was. Yes, he
teenage
was.
kid in there.
Mm-hmm. Yep,
Yeah.
for sure. That was his start.
Yes,
Yep.
that was his first, one of his first. Todd, correct me if I'm wrong.
It was his first major role for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
He plays opposite Reese Witherspoon. He's her love
Yeah.
interest in Pleasantville. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
That's right.
Oh, okay.
See, I even brought it right back around to Fast and Furious for you.
you did.
There you
There we
go.
go.
So, go ahead, Bill. You ask it.
I was just wondering, this may not apply to Paul as well, because I think I know every car he's ever had, because he hasn't had that many. But I think I know what the answer is going to be if he has one. Do you have a car that got away? It could be one you had and sold and wish it was back, or it could be one that you wish you had bought.
That's
Well, the next series we're doing addresses this a little bit. And I won't go any further than that, but our next
Okay.
addresses it.
I suppose we if we had introduced him, we could talk a little bit more about him. But
All
yeah,
right,
Yeah.
very well.
Yeah. So
All
in the
right.
next 3 or 4
Tune
weeks,
in.
we actually announce that. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
That sounds-
Tune
Oh,
into
I think
every
I know.
day.
I think I know.
Yep.
Okay. So my guess was Paul was going to say his 928.
Mhm.
Since you can't answer, so I'll answer. And Todd was going to be the 300Z, but it wishes was a turbo.
Guesses, good guesses. No, I'll be very. We just finished our raffle on our current cheap sports cars, and those are headed out to new owners in 2 or 3 weeks. And we have got in hand our cars for the next series, and we're gonna deal with that starting in about 3 weeks. It's gonna be really cool.
Cannot wait. Miss
For
Vicky,
sure.
might as well let you have a turn. I've done like 3.
Yeah, that's good. What is a car from your childhood and your family that sticks out the most?
oh, I do have that one. It wasn't one my parents owned, but my dad knew the local real estate agent. I don't know what you call them, the superstar real estate agents now that are in Beverly Hills, and they sell hundreds of millions of dollars worth of property. He was that in Fort Collins, so small town. His name was Bob Wolf. He was the man, the real estate guy. Bob Wolf, with a name like that, he was just like, hey, I'm Bob Wolf, real estate guy. He wore the white collars with the blue shirt, and he had his initials monogrammed on his shirt, the watch, the chains, and he had a Jaguar XJ6 with the twin fuel fillers on each side and a cell phone in the car. It was so cool.
Was it like the brick, a cell phone?
No, it was the hard mounts, but it was right there next to the shifter, and it was just this status symbol. A cell phone, a phone.
Yeah, you're right. So,
You can be moving while you called somebody. What on earth? It was fantastic. Bob Wolf, he was the man.
okay. Yeah, that's good. Mine I've discussed off and on before, but I'll tell the joke again. My dad is essentially Ned Flanders, who you would never possibly drive anything cool, and that is very much that's very much who the man is. And interestingly enough, Ned Flanders has 2 kids. One of them is named Todd. So So anyway, so that's essentially who my father is. bought, as you already heard, a string of Caprice Classics and many, 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 many boring cars that he did not maintain. But inexplicably, right around the time that my parents got married, my dad, with his new job as an engineer, was able to afford a Jaguar E-Type. And so he bought a Jaguar E-Type for a few years when he actually apparently drove fast. Those days have long gone, but apparently my mom tells me he drove fast in a Jaguar E-Type. Sold that, and then we ended up moving to England when I was about 3. While we were in England, he bought another one. So we were living overseas, but he had another E-Type, and his dad had a garage. So they were slowly restoring it. I put that in air quotes because it was the world's worst restoration. But, I remember we would have family trips back, and Dad and his dad would spend time just working on the E-Type. And because it was never quite getting addressed, and because we were overseas most of the time, he ended up selling that when I was about 12. And I have the visual memory of it driving down the drive of my grandparents' house and leaving our life. And I never got a chance to drive it. And I had, multiple memories of riding in it with my dad, but never got to drive it. And so it was always the car that got away. And even doing this show, it wasn't until 2 years ago that I even had a chance to drive one for the first time. I ended up driving 2 very different ones in the same calendar year. But it was always this car. It's the car that stops me at a Cars and Coffee. I don't care how many times I've seen one. I have sent memories of being in the car as a kid. It does that to me. It really, really connects with me. And I finally got to drive a couple really well-sorted ones a couple of years ago. And you would think it's that Meet Your Heroes moment. You would think I'd be like, yeah, that's disappointing. And no, it wasn't. I would love to have one, but I know how unreliable they can be. And that hasn't happened yet.
Wow. So it's nostalgia for you.
Absolutely. Yep, for sure.
Is that the same thing with you? Also, both of them nostalgia?
I suppose so. It was more just the impression that the people who own them. I suppose another one that influenced me was a guy named John Park, who moved to this weird place called Park City later. He was a friend of my uncle's, and they were both ophthalmologists. And he bought in mid 80s, I think 84, 85 Daytona, or the Chrysler version of it. And it had a turbo on it. I didn't know what a turbo was. And it was fast. He punched it and we took off. And I thought, my parents were holding out on me. How come they've not told me about turbos? I didn't know that turbos existed.
There's a reason why they didn't tell you about turbos.
I didn't
Yes,
know.
very true.
And John Park took me for a ride in his new car, and it was probably super underpowered, but when he, any turbocharger in a car is sort of like, oh, wow, there's the power. And he took me and he punched it, and I was just going, you're the man. You're a doctor and you have a turbo. What? And then the
doctor bought a Dodge Daytona, all the stuff he could have gotten, and he wound up with a Dodge Daytona turbo. That, on reflection, that was not good choices on his part. Yeah, sorry.
What do you guys also think? Another question for you. What was the best decade for cars? For you.
Oh, okay.
Like if you could have it or have an opportunity to drive them or race them of any decade in the past, what would you like to get into?
Doesn't have to end in 0. It could be.
Of course, they probably had their butts in any of these cars already.
It could be like 64 to 74. Could be whatever.
Yeah. What is your favorite? How about what is your favorite decade of cars?
Wow. There's always so close, but I've heard this question asked by many people, and I think it's just influenced by the time period and when you grew up. And that's, for me, certainly the 80s. I mean, all the 80s Porsches, of course, and the 80s, the German touring car, all the BMWs in there too, and the Mercedes from the 80s, and all those cars. I just feel like that was such a great era for me.
I would say I think 60s. I'm going to answer twice. 60s because the dichotomy of cars in the 60s, you've got the stuff coming out of Europe, which is things like the E-Type and the little convertibles and that kind of stuff. And the Japanese are dabbling into cars that are these minute little things. And then here in the US, we're building the king of muscle cars at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So the 60s is fascinating to me from a result. Now, the problem is you drive those cars now and across the board, they all feel old. I mean, really, really old, which is the problem. Even when they're well sorted, it's like, well, this feels fragile, which is too bad. So jumping to more modern stuff that I just so much resonates between 85 and 95, I can't even get over it. I mean, you think about the fact that covers things like the 959 and the F3, but it also covers the great 90s supercars from Japan. And the NSX gets introduced, and the S2000 is just past that. But this is kind of the era that's going on there. That 85 to 95 era, it's amazing the stuff that comes out. One of the cars that is in my, you're not kidding me, I have to have more money than brains to buy it, but I would, is the Jaguar XJ220. That car makes no sense, but I would have one in a heartbeat if I had crazy money, and that's that same era. So that's
Electrical issues?
The E-Type did, but by then they had sorted that. This is the XJ220 from, early 90s, 92, 93. And it was the car that Jaguar had promised all their customers would be powered by a V12. And when it was introduced, it was a twin turbo V6, and everybody was disappointed. It didn't matter that it went 220 miles an hour. It didn't matter that it was fast. It just didn't have the V12, and everybody was pissed.
It was their world-beating supercar in the early 90s, and I think with modern wheels on it, if you ever see one, it still looks like a spaceship. It looked amazing then, it looks amazing now, but the ergonomics are known to be terrible, and the engine was out of some sort of Ford Mondeo or Transit van. It was like one of those that they hyped up, which is, let's be honest, what the Lotus is doing now with Camry engines, but that was totally unacceptable. But they were crazy fast and still look great, and they make no sense. But again, this is the 90s. Well, also think about the fact that the EB110 is the 90s too. I mean, crazy stuff going on.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I think Todd just answered one of these, but let's pretend. So we're going to win a lottery. We're going to have a track. We're going to have a great driving road. It's going to be, Vicky hates this question. Thank you, Vicky.
I'm sitting here erasing it at the same time.
She tries to erase it every single time. So we win the lottery. Part of our giving back is that each of our guests come on to the podcast for being so hospitable and welcoming and actually saying yes. We want you to come to our island, but we want to make sure we have the right 5 cars for you. So you get 5 cars. Okay. Track, road, anything you want, off-road, we've got it all. We've won this lottery big. Taco truck has been mentioned, not more than once.
Got it.
5 cars. I can't wait.
Wow.
Who wants to go first?
I've got a few in my mind. Todd, if you've got all of them, go ahead.
I'll give it a shot. Eagle E-Type. That is the pristine resto mod version of Jaguar E-Type. Yes, the XJ220's got to be in there. McLaren F1. The Lotus Elise is hanging on because it's just a moment in time car. I'm 4 deep already, aren't I?
Yeah.
Wow, that went fast.
It does, doesn't it? It's like I've got more.
I do have more, but because it's stupid and I'm sure the island would have it be fun, I'm going to totally surprise you and go Ram TRX truck.
Oh, we're going off-roading.
Yep. We're going to bash through something because it can.
Wow. Those are good.
It used to have hills, and the Ram took care of it and made them all flat.
Exactly right. There you go.
Very well. All right, Paul.
Wow.
You've got pressure now.
I am going to start with a 1935 Bugatti Type 35 because who else has a straight 8? Is it
true?
1929 to 1935?
Good. That's very good.
Type 37 or Type 35 Bugatti, and like those, just open top.
Have you driven one yet?
I have not, but I've been close, very close to one running and then seeing it drive. It was actually at a Sotheby's auction in Beverly Hills. And I just thought, I got to go see this car. And the idiots at Sotheby's were screwing around with a car in the back alley in Beverly Hills. Mm-hmm. And they fired that thing up and were racing in the back alley, like of snooty Beverly Hills. They were racing this thing that was going to be auctioned for millions of dollars. They're like, we don't care. Let's see how it works. And, of course, everybody was like, wow, what's this? It was so thrashy. I would also say a 58 Ferrari Testarossa, 1958.
Okay.
Just sculpture on
Knew
wheels.
you'd go there. Yeah, amazing.
So good. Can I add a 62 Ferrari GTO? Since we're,
hey, we're here. It's your island. You come on. Feel free to bring what you like. Just tell us what we need to have for you.
Shoot. Wow. I'll go with McLaren F1 as well. Got to have that one. And then I'm going to go Porsche 959. Like that thing.
Okay. I would have put money on a 959.
It does have granny gear. You can technically take it off road because it was designed for the car rally. So
inexplicably has that gear. Yes.
Yeah. Just use the granny gear.
All right. Well, if you want to take it off road, we'll let you. That's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So I have one. This is always an interesting question. I just need to say it differently than it's written. What would you say for you is the worst car ever to roll off a production line?
Wow.
Worst. The
Now,
worst.
I know the Yugo is mine.
Worst.
It's up there. That's good. That's a good option. Yeah.
I know Vicky's first car may have been the single individual worst car.
No, I liked my car. We've already been there. You leave the Pinto alone. I know it's a horrible car, but
Had no floorboards.
There's many horrible cars throughout time. There's many.
yes.
I'm gonna go with DeLorean.
Oh,
Wow.
Matt Ferris not going to be happy
Yeah.
with you.
Yeah.
Controversial. Well done.
Yeah. DeLorean.
You know, it's there's all these low-hanging fruit options are banging around in my head, but I'm going to go here because not only was it genuinely bad, but it was also genuinely successful, and that makes me even angrier. And that's the PT Cruiser.
Oh my gosh, right?
They couldn't
the-
make them fast enough. They were so wildly successful when they came out. And the first time I got in one, literally, I sat down and when I went, "You're kidding!" I hadn't even driven it yet. I was like, "This is what everyone's buying."
I
gotta be
refer
kidding.
to it as the midlife crisis car
I guess
because that's what it seems like. Everybody was reliving something, and it was all midlife crisis people that were buying them.
it tapped
Sure.
into this crazy nostalgia, and it's an objectively bad car, but yet it was wild. I mean, you can go with something like the Pontiac Aztec. Okay, everybody makes fun of it, blah blah, but it was also a sales disaster. But the PT Cruiser was wildly successful enough that the designer was stolen to GM to make the SSR or whatever they called it, the whatever
The
that was called.
HHR, the high.
Thank you. Not the
Yeah.
SSR. That's a whole other disaster.
That's
The
a whole
HHR. but the
Yeah.
PT Cruiser was successful enough. You're stealing the designer to make your own.
Yeah.
And
Didn't get
then
much
they made
better.
a turbo version and a convertible version. You get that in a turbo convertible, which is like I don't even
Bad.
know what's going on in that meeting.
With
That's
woody
terrifying.
graphics, with the woody sides too. Ooh.
All right, let's
That's awesome.
let's go to someplace nice to get Todd out of this spot that he's worked himself into.
Here you go, Todd.
Favorite car movie or car from a movie TV counts to of all time.
Of all time, I'm going Ronin with Robert De Niro.
Okay.
The car chases in that film were real. I mean, they were not, but there was no CG, and it was just straight up stunt driving. And there's multiple car chases that are phenomenal. I still watch that movie and I'm blown away by how good the driving is and how well it was shot and how realistic it was. The driving and the car chases in that film of all time, Ronin.
Are you staying
That's a
on
good one.
theme? Are you going Cobra for the Stallone theme to bring it back, or are we going somewhere else, Todd?
No, actually, you know what? Favorite car from a movie, because I can't believe it actually exists, is the Tumbler from the Christopher Nolan Batman series.
Yeah.
I can't believe that exists in the real world and moves. That looks like something that would have been a CGI creation. I hands down, like movie car, that's it for me. Oh man, you know what? Both Rush and Ford versus Ferrari has some of my very favorite car sequences. And they did a good job in both of those of combining CGI and actual production in both of those to make it happen. And I think, I mean, you could go to something like, Steve McQueen did Le Mans, it's all that kind of stuff. But look, that's very realistic, and I'm impressed that you shot it. But the only reason I engage with that is because I'm impressed you got it shot at all. At least in Ford versus Ferrari and Rush, I'm engaged in the drama of what you've done. And you've also showcased these cars that I can't believe you got running and got to do that. So I'm very impressed with both of those. I mean, look, I'll go to the other end of the spectrum. The first 10 minutes of the Michael Bay film, the Underground 6 or 600 Ground, whatever it is, has a bright neon yellow Alpha Giulia in an amazing car chase that has more carnage for random bystanders than anyone has ever put in a film. That is the height of Hollywood car movie making. Michael Bay started in car commercials, and he's still one of the best doing it. It has no bearing on actual reality and how things happen, but it is an amazing 10 minutes of cinematic car chase.
Yeah, that is pretty good. There's a Maserati in there that just gets destroyed.
Decimated. When it tumbles, you can see the roll cage. It's just they
used a
it out.
Quattroporte in there. It's fantastic.
Yes.
Just got. You want to know where some of those cars went? That film. They used them up.
For sure. Yeah.
Like you use tissues, they used up Maseratis.
That is a Michael Bay film, so he's not exactly kind to his
Yeah, absolutely.
his stunts. So, Miss Vicky,
Yeah. So how can our guests keep in contact with you? Do you
We're
have
easy. We're Everyday Driver. We're at whatever platform you're on. We're everydaydriver.com. We're Everyday Driver on YouTube. We're Everyday Driver on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. The only place that we aren't just that is if you're looking for the podcast, it's good to actually look for the Everyday Driver Car Debate. But if you go to our website, it really just exists to see what spoke of the wheel do you want to get to. You can get to the podcast and all of it. So that's the easiest place to find us is everydaydriver.com. But we're that everywhere, thankfully.
Yep.
every day is everywhere?
Yep, pretty much.
Right. Everyday Driver TV at Gmail is our email address, but you can use the form on the website too. It just syndicates to the same place. So either way, whatever's convenient for you. So yeah, we love hearing from people. And what's nice is we get a lot of emails from fans of the show who saw something and just, oh, the guy's got to see this. And they took a photo or they found some listing for a car or whatever. And it's great. It's just, hey, like you would send to a friend. So we appreciate that.
Isn't the car community great? They really
It's
are.
crazy. It's very cool.
well, we are so happy we got you guys finally tracked down, corralled,
Yeah,
persuaded
fun.
to come on, and had a great time. I am not holding any grudges that you gave Spot away to somebody else. That's fine. That's fine.
Hey,
It was
It
very
was-
entertaining to watch.
it was the straight up raffle for sure, and I'm glad
I
it worked out.
understand.
Yeah.
I did the best I could to tilt the scales in my favor, but I didn't
understand.
tilt enough. That's fine.
Yeah, I get
It's
it.
fine. I'll get over it someday. I have a mini.
Stop
I'm
it.
okay. So until we meet in person finally at one point or at a track someday, or
Cool.
when we talk you guys and Todd relaxes a little bit and has some time in his schedule and you're back on the podcast, wanted to say thank you for everything you've done. Thank you for everything you do for cars. Thank you for what you've done for our family and all our friends. And can't express how much you guys have meant to what we do and what we love right now.
That's really cool. Thank you for saying that. I'm honored that that's the case. We're glad to finally be on with you guys. I'm sorry it took so long.
Oh,
Great.
no worries. We understand.
Great to hear. That's really great to hear. We appreciate it.
It's
We
your
consider
fault
you
we got
guys.
into this very expensive hobby.
Yeah. But everybody has to pour money, so we have to do it. Yeah.
The good thing we did was we pulled everybody in. So
We did.
nobody can say they're left out. So
We
There you
did.
go. That's fair. That's fair. That's
Thank
good
you,
stuff.
guys.
I love it.
So nice to be on with you. We
Thank
agree.
you.
all right. Thank you guys.
Have a great night.
You too.
Talk to you later.
Thank
Bye.
you.